It's time for munching and mating in the Macrocystis, or giant kelp, with your host, Dr. Bill Bushing. One of the best things about my job is that when I go to the office, I don't have to wear a tie with my suit. Wetsuit, that is. This episode focuses on one of the least observed but vitally important elements in marine ecosystems, the plankton. We will look at the vital role these communities play, both in the ocean environment and on the water planet as a whole. For scuba divers, plankton blooms are often a curse, leading to very poor visibility. Landlubbers are usually unaware of them unless a red tide affects nearshore waters. Thus, plankton are generally unnoticed until they create a negative impact for humans. However, they are a critical part of marine ecosystems. These often microscopic organisms affect food webs humans depend on, the air we breathe, and possibly even the planet's climate and future well-being. Plankton comes from the Greek word planktos, meaning wanderer or drifter, because they are unable to overcome horizontal ocean currents. Some forms are capable of independent movement and may migrate hundreds of yards vertically each day. Plankton are distinguished from nekton, organisms capable of active swimming like fish, marine mammals, or squid, and bottom-dwelling organisms referred to as benthic. A liter of seawater may contain 500 million planktonic organisms or plankters, almost 2 billion per gallon. Even Carl Sagan would be impressed. A world of biological diversity and complex interactions exists within these communities. Plankton may be divided into bacteria, photosynthetic plant or phytoplankton, and animal or zooplankton. Scientists long considered diatoms and Dena Flagellates to be the most common photosynthetic groups in the sea. However, in the 1980s, the role of the much smaller photosynthetic cyanobacteria was recognized. They are now believed to make up the largest proportion of the plankton, numerically and in terms of diversity. Let's do a quick review of the various types of plankters based on their scientific classification. The tiniest plankton includes cyanobacteria, formerly called blue-green algae. Diatoms are major contributors to photosynthesis in colder, nutrient-rich coastal waters. Structurally, the rigid cell wall is composed of two tightly fitting valves made of silicon or pectin. There are two basic types, centric and pinnate. They may occur as single cells, chains, or even colonies. We can see deposits exposed as limestone and chalk in areas like Two Harbors on Catalina Island and the White Cliffs of Dover in England. Foraminifera, or forams, are single-celled organisms covered by shells called tests, composed of calcium carbonate, silicon, or organic matter. They look like tiny snails and add chambers to their tests as they grow. Scientists estimate that 30% of the ocean floor may be covered with an ooze composed of dead foram tests. Radiolarians are tiny round organisms with shells made of silica. Their skeletal remains may also form sediments on the ocean floor that can emerge as sedimentary rocks at the surface. Coccolithophores are single-celled organisms protected by often ornate calcareous plates known as coccoliths. These are embedded in a gelatinous sheath surrounding the cell. Coccolithophores are most abundant in the warm open ocean, but are sometimes found near shore. Dena Flagellates are single-celled organisms that come in a wide variety of sizes and shapes. Some have shells of cellulose, but others lack them entirely. They bear two flagella, or whip-like structures for limited propulsion. Although widespread, they are most abundant in nutrient-poor offshore waters. Dena Flagellates are bioluminescent, emitting a pale blue glow when excited. This can be observed at night as waves crash on the shore, in boat wakes, when larger fish or marine mammals swim through the water, or even when you flush a saltwater toilet or head. Some species are toxic and are often the cause of red and brown tides when present in large blooms. Larger members of the plankton community are usually more familiar to humans because they don't require a microscope to see them. Crustaceans form a large part of the animal plankton. One group, the Copepods, are sometimes called the insects of the sea because there are so many of them. About 10,000 species are known to science. Like other crustaceans, these critters have segmented bodies and bear two antennae. Krill are another group of planktonic crustaceans most people are familiar with. They are a primary food source for the great whales that filter feed. There are at least 82 species identified to date, ranging from a quarter to over 2 inches in length, or about 6 to over 50 millimeters. A host of other taxonomic groups live in the plankton. Cnidarians or Cnidarians include small medusae on up to the much larger jellyfish, or sea jellies. Their relatives, the siphonophores, include the well-known Portuguese man-of-war, as well as the lesser-known deeper-water hula-skirt siphonophore, Praia, and Apolemia, all with the capability to sting. Other gelatinous members of the plankton include the comb jellies or ctenophores, and salps or pelagic tunicates, which are actually our closest invertebrate relatives. Can you see the family resemblance? Chetognaths or arrowworms are common carnivores in planktonic communities. Pteropods may be seen flapping through the water column. Segmented worms are also frequently seen, either as larvae or adults in some species. Many other groups of invertebrates are found in the plankton, including bivalves like clams, snails, and echinoderms like sea urchins and starfish. Most are temporary members of the plankton during their early life stages. Although plankton are defined by their inability to swim faster than the currents, human beings like to categorize critters based on a range of factors, including their scientific classification, size, and role in marine food webs. While most are microscopic, plankton include much larger organisms such as jellyfish, now referred to as sea jellies by the politically correct, since they are not fish. Duh! Plankton are often grouped in size classes based on their length in micrometers, also known as microns. 1 inch equals 25,400 microns. The tiniest plankton, less than 0.2 microns, are small viruses and are known as femtoplankton. Larger viruses, bacteria, and small protists from 0.2 to 2 microns are called picoplankton. Diatoms, coccolithophores, and small algae from 2 to 20 microns are classified as nanoplankton. Larger diatoms, Dena Flagellates, Foraminifera, and smaller zooplankton between 20 and 200 microns form the microplankton. Krill, adult copepods, small jellyfish or medusae, the larvae of invertebrates, and many other larger zooplankton measuring 200 to 2,000 microns, or 2 to 20 millimeters, are categorized as macroplankton. Finally, something we can actually see. The big guys greater than 20 millimeters, or just under 1 inch, like fish larvae, ctenophores or comb jellies, salps, and jellyfish, constitute the megaplankton. Scientists generally use plankton nets consisting of a mesh net supported by a rigid ring with a bridle and tow line and equipped with a collecting device at the other end. They are towed behind a boat or used vertically from piers and other structures. Nets of varying size meshes are necessary to sample specific plankton. Very fine mesh nets are used to sample the tiny bacteria and photosynthetic organisms, while coarser ones collect planktonic larvae or other larger plankton. Here you see a very simple plankton net created from a nylon stocking, PVC pipe connector, prescription bottle, and a tow line. Plant and animal tissues weigh more than salt water, so plankton often need methods to keep them suspended in the water column and prevent them from sinking. Smaller plankton have less of a problem due to their high surface area to volume ratio. As they increase in size, they need to employ other mechanisms. This is especially important for photosynthetic organisms, which need to remain in the upper layers to absorb sunlight. One method is to store oils, fats, or even air inside their body or cells. Diatoms store certain oils within their cells to accomplish this. Siphonophores and paper nautilus incorporate floats filled with gases. The more complex an organism's shape, the higher the surface area to volume ratio. Flattened bodies and long body extensions increase buoyancy. Larvae often exhibit spines or legs and antennae. Polychaete worms, whose name means many-bristled, usually have chitinous hair-like chaetae on their parapodia or feet. Single-celled organisms may also form long chains that decrease the rate at which they might sink individually, by increasing the surface area to volume ratio of the resulting chain. Other planktons are able to effect limited mobility through the use of cilia, whip-like flagella, or even distinct legs and other swimming structures. The veliger larvae of snails have a ciliated velum, or mantle foot, that is quite effective in moving them about. Another distinct adaptation used by many planktons is transparency. This gives them a measure of camouflage against their predators in daytime. Planktonic food webs are similar to those on land, in a kelp forest, or on a coral reef. They involve primary producers, consumers, and recyclers. Primary producers include photosynthetic organisms which convert the energy in sunlight into stored energy like carbohydrates. They take 6 molecules of carbon dioxide and 6 molecules of water to create 1 molecule of carbohydrate. Photosynthetic phytoplankton include diatoms and coccolithophores, as well as the much smaller and more numerous cyanobacteria. Most of the primary production in the ocean is due to these planktonic components, rather than the seaweeds and large kelps near shore. Since much of our planet's photosynthetic activity occurs in the 70% that is water, much of our atmospheric oxygen supply also originates there. Estimates range from about half to as much as 98% of our free oxygen comes from the ocean. Based on this, planktonic primary producers are of great importance to humans as well as all other respiring life forms on Earth. Dena Flagellates are a puzzle to scientists. Long believed to be phytoplankton, since they photosynthesize, recent research has shown they can assimilate organic matter directly and even take other organisms as prey. They are called mixotrophs because they function as both primary producers and consumers. More traditional consumers are the herbivores, which eat plant life, and predators, which eat herbivores and one another. Forams catch food with hair-like extensions known as pseudopodia. Radiolarians also use sticky pseudopodia to capture phytoplankton. Larger animal or zooplankton like copepods graze on both phytoplankton and other animal plankton. Additional carnivores include the larvae of normally benthic invertebrates, as well as the larval stages of fish. The recyclers in planktonic food webs are largely bacteria. They play an important role in remineralizing organic matter and in biogeochemical processes such as the carbon cycle in both marine and terrestrial ecosystems. Plant plankton fix carbon through photosynthesis. Zooplankton ingest it and then release it through respiration or as detritus through their feces or death, and the bacteria then process it back into mineral form. Of course, planktonic food webs extend well into the nectonic and benthic worlds. Many commercial fish species begin life as drifting larvae that feed on plankton. When larger, they may switch food preferences to bait fish that feed directly on plankton, and later eat other fish that feed on the bait fish. Thus, healthy plankton communities are critical to many commercial fisheries and our own food supply. The majestic baleen whales, including the gray, humpback, fin, and blue whales seen in Southern California waters, feed directly on the larger plankton such as krill. In Southern California's magnificent kelp forests, plankton provide an alternate food base for nectonic and benthic creatures. Bait fish such as sardines and jack mackerel feed directly on the plankton. In turn, they may be eaten by predatory fish such as kelp bass or barracuda. Any of these fish may be taken by a shark, a spearfisher, or an angler. Another planktivorous fish in the kelp forest is the blacksmith, a close relative of the Garibaldi. Here, schooling blacksmiths feed on plankton, which they detect visually and pick out of the water. Only a source of nourishment near the base of a food chain, such as plankton, could provide enough energy to support such large populations. The blacksmith in turn are eaten by kelp bass, moray eels, or marine mammals. Benthic organisms which feed on plankton are either suspension feeders or filter feeders. Suspension feeders include worms like Myxicola and fanworms, sea anemones, or the crevice sea cucumber, which uses its tentacles to capture them and pull them inside its mouth. Filter feeders include sponges, clams, and other bivalves such as rock scallops, tube worms like Chaetopterus, barnacles, and tunicates. Plankton may be further categorized by how much of their life they spend as drifters. Holoplankton live their entire lives within the plankton, while meroplankton only spend a portion of their lives there, usually the egg and or larval stage, before settling out to the bottom or becoming members of the nekton or swimmers. Such planktonic larvae include the nauplius of barnacles, the zoe of crabs, veligers of snails, larvae of polychaete worms, starfish, Pluteus and later larval forms of brittle stars and sea urchins, and fish larvae. Planktonic larval stages enable members of a species to disperse and colonize new habitat, and increase gene flow between otherwise isolated populations. For example, Santa Catalina Island off Southern California is isolated for both terrestrial species and for many marine organisms that cannot swim or crawl from the mainland to it. Terrestrial organisms like birds and insects can fly to the island. Plants have developed mechanisms that allow dispersal across such barriers. The San Pedro Channel reaches depths of up to 3,500 feet. Most fish and marine mammals can swim to colonize Catalina. However, there aren't many starfish or sea urchins that can crawl across the 20 miles of deep ocean bottom during their lifetime. And attached forms like sponges, hydroids, and many bivalves can't detach as adults and move. Thus, they require such a life stage capable of long-distance dispersal. Now you see that plankton are a very critical component in our planet's and our own ecological health. Stay tuned for future episodes.